This is Memorial Day weekend, and I was looking at a little information on the history, and of course Memorial Day, as we know, it's a time of remembrance. There are things that we need to remember, and there are things that we need to forget. And wisdom is the ability to discern the difference between what you need to remember and what you need to forget. Amen. And it's a time that we remember. This weekend we remember those who have given their lives for in service for the incredible nation that we live in today. And right now we just want to recognize all of our veterans or anybody who's in the service. Anybody, would you just stand right now? We want to recognize you. We want to honor you. Come on, would you give the Lord a praise? Amen. Amen. We honor you and thank you for your service. Jesus said it like this in John 15:35. No greater love is no one than this, than to lay down his life for his friends. And of course, Memorial Day began right after the Civil War, honoring those who had given their lives. It started gaining traction in World War I and World War II, just celebrating the great men and women who have served our country and have given their lives, paid the ultimate price to enjoy the freedom that we have. You know what? We may have some problems, we may have some issues, but I still believe that this is the greatest country, this is the greatest nation in the world. Come on now, it's an honor to live where we live today and to have the freedom to do this right here. There's people all over the world that wish they had the opportunity to be in the seat that you're in right now. There are people who risk their lives meeting together on worship times. And what we take for granted often, other people are sacrificing their lives to do what we're doing today. And we just give God the glory for what He's doing in our lives and in here today. So today's text is going to be in Joshua chapter number 4. Joshua chapter 4, verse number 6 and 7. And we want to go there real quick. Joshua 4, 6 and 7. And it says, "So that this will be a sign among you." Tell your neighbor, say, God's trying to give you a sign. He's trying to give you a sign. Quick rabbit trail. I was reminded of Bruce Almighty, and he's going down the road, and he's praying, and he's like, God, just give me a sign, give me a sign. And there's like this flashing neon sign that pulls up over here, and then another one over here, and he's praying, God, give me a sign, give me a sign. And there's all of these flashing lights and all of these signs that are all around him. And finally he just gets at this place of desperation. He's like, God, really, 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 I need a sign. And then there's this construction truck that's in front of him that's like full of all of these signs, and they're just right there, obvious, but he can't discern it. And I believe that's how we are a lot of times. It's like we're like, God, give me a sign, please, please. And there's like flashing things all around us. And really, instead of praying, God, give me a sign, we should really be praying, God, help me to discern the signs that are all around me, because you're speaking all around. So this will be a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean to you? You should tell them, the waters of the Jordan were cut off in front of the ark of the Lord's covenant. And when it crossed the Jordan's rivers were cut off. Therefore, these stones will always be a memorial for the Israelites. He says when they came out of the wilderness into transitioning into the promise, when they crossed the Jordan, they took stones, 12 stones, and they stacked them up. And about anywhere you go on a nature trail today that's close to a river, you'll see stones stacked up. And for a lot of people, they mean a lot of different things. But for us as the people of God, when we see these stones stacked, it's a reminder that God has brought us out of something and He's brought us into something. And a lot of people can tell you about what God brought them out of, but can you tell what God is bringing you into? He's bringing us out of the wilderness into our inheritance, into the promises that He has for us. 1 Peter 2:5 says it like this: you yourselves, you are living stones. We are living stones, fitly joined together for a spiritual house, that we would bring spiritual sacrifices that are acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. The word remember is in your Bible 148 times. 148 times the word remember is in the Bible. And it kind of I can say this morning because Heather's not here. It's like, it kind of reminds me of my wife. It's like, Michael, remember what I told you. Remember this. Remember. And why is the Bible full of these statements of remembering? Because often we are forgetful people. And so the word remember actually means just to call to your mind an awareness of an experience that has been seen or that has been known. And once again, my prayer is, God, help me to remember everything I need to remember. Help me to forget everything that I need to forget, because some things are worth remembering and some things you can't move forward from until you forget about it. That's why the word says, forget the things that are behind us. We keep moving forward. There's always a forward momentum that we are in pursuing the presence of the Lord. And so what we see is in this remembering is that every memory that you have in your mind right now, every memory is connected to a moment. Every memory, whether it's a good memory or a bad memory, every memory that you have is connected to a moment. We don't remember everything, but we remember moments. And with those moments, there's an attached a memory. And with that memory, there's an attachment of a feeling. That's why you can be driving down the road and the song come on the radio that was on when you were with your boys hanging out, and you go back into that moment, that feeling of what was going on in that moment. Or songs, music takes you places. It's like a vehicle. It begins to transport you back in time to where you feel things, you see things. Y'all looking at me like, what's he talking about right here? You know exactly what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Memories are made from moments. So we have these things that He wants us to remember. And it's good for us to continually remind ourselves of the things that God has done, what He has brought us through. Everybody in this room can remember where you were, what you were doing. September the 11th, 2001, when the Trade Center fell, when both of the towers fell. Every one of us can go back in time and remember exactly what we were doing at that moment, because with the moment there is a memory that is attached. I remember back, I don't know, probably some 20 some odd years ago, counting change in my living room floor. My dad told us before when we were growing up, and it carried on to after we moved out. Dad said, whenever you use change, take your cash, and when you get your change back, take your loose coins and put them in a jar, put them in a bucket, put them somewhere, and then when you really need some money, you just pull from that change. And so I did that, and what I'd had already done at this point. Parker was about 2 years old. Paige was newborn, and we were struggling greatly financially. And I'd already been to that change jar, and I already took all the silver out. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? All the silver was gone. All the silver was gone, and the only thing left was copper. And so I had it all spread out in my living room floor, and I had the copper in groups of 10, so I knew there's 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get to church on Sunday morning the church that I was pastoring in Calhoun, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get the money for gas to get to the church that I'm supposed to be pastoring. And I was just a baby myself. And I'm going through all of this in my mind, trying to figure out, okay, I also got milk, I also got stuff for the kids, and I'm sitting here in the living room floor, and I just got it all laid out before God, and I'm like, God, I just trust you. When I started serving you, I had nothing. I have nothing now. You're everything. You're absolutely everything. And out of the gate, I gave you my yes, and but I need a little help walking out that yes. And so I'm sitting here on the floor, and I'm counting out the coins, and I'm going through there, and like, God, your word says you're faithful, that you're a provider, and I'm thinking, because I mean, I don't see it right now, but I know that you are, and your credit is good with me. Some of y'all don't even know what I'm talking about, do you? Like, God, your credit's good with me, because your word said it, and so I just trust you that it's so. And about that time, I remember getting a knock on the front door. It's about 10:30 on Saturday morning. And I opened the door, and it's a brother that I haven't seen in a good while. And he said, hey, man, I just happened to be driving through. Actually, I came here on purpose. I came here bringing you something. And he reached in his pocket, and he pulled out some money and gave it to me. And I was like, wow, thank you. And after he left, you know what you do when somebody gives you money after they leave. You pull it out and like, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700. He gave me $1,000, 10 $100 bills. And I was like, that moment created a memory for me early on when I realized when I was at the bottom, I could ask the Lord, God, help me to walk out my yes. I'm not asking you for a Ferrari. I'm asking you for gas money to get down to the church that I'm supposed to be preaching at. I'm asking you for money to help with all of this. And back then I realized that I really had a poverty mindset. And if you were raised in poverty, you have a poverty mindset that you don't even realize that you have, because the first thing that goes through your mind when you have a poverty mindset is what you don't have instead of what you do have. And so I remember shortly after that, I was listening to Brother Creflo Dollar. And I was listening to him, and he was preaching a message from 3 John 2 that, beloved, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. And I got this revelation, wait a minute, God wants me to be in health. He wants me to be healthy. He wants my soul to prosper. He wants my life to be a prosperous life, not just so that I can have 15 cars and 36 houses, but he wants me to have enough to fulfill what prosperity is. Prosperity is enough to fulfill the assignment that God has placed upon your life. That's what prosperity is. When we talk about prosperity, people say, oh, there you go, you're talking about that money again. If you think prosperity is money only, you are in a poverty mindset. Prosperity is nothing missing. It's shalom in Hebrew. It's nothing missing, nothing lacking, and nothing broken. You see, I was getting a hold of this, and I was listening to this, and I realized before my life could change, my confession had to change. Because up until that point, I was always saying, Heather would say, hey, let's go do this. And I'd be like, baby, we can't do that. We broke. The kids would say something, I can't do that. We broke. My confession was always, we're broke, we're broke, we're broke. And I'm like, wait a minute. If God's not saying that I'm broke, why should I be saying that I'm broke? I love what Bill Johnson said. It's illegal for me to have a thought in my mind about me that he don't have about me. And I was in Philadelphia on Monday talking to a couple of presidents of companies that we're working with, and I was in Columbia, South Carolina on Tuesday talking to a couple other presidents that we're working with of corporations, and And for some reason, we're in this boardroom meeting, and I'm sharing this testimony with him of how when I got a hold of this 3 John 2 revelation, that I began to see beyond where that we were, and I had to change my confession. I had to change what was coming out of my mouth, because my world was following my words, and my world was framed by my words. And if I wanted something different, I had to change what was coming out of my mouth, because death and life were in the power of the tongue. And I began to remember the moment that it began to shift and change and begin to see. And I was listening to him, and he was talking about have this dream board and have this vision board and see yourself beyond where you are right now. And so I was sitting down with the president of this company that's getting ready to go into a $60 million project, which I didn't know about. And I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm sitting here telling him, and God showed me at that moment I had to see beyond where I was right now. And this dude just starts breaking down, bawling. And he's like, keep going with the story, keep going with the story. And I said, well, what I did next is we're living in the basement of my mother-in-law's house, and I start calling up realtors, and I said, hey, we want to make some appointments to look into some of these $500,000 houses. And you look at me now and you say, that is stupid, Michael. You're living in the basement. You can't even afford to pay your rent, and you calling realtors up to look in $500,000 houses. Oh, baby, it gets better. We pull up in our 1984 Buick Century at the Cadillac dealership. And the lady comes out and says, what you here for, honey? And I said, we're going to test drive the Escalade. She looks at my car, and she looks at the Escalade. She looks at me and Heather, and she looks at the Escalade. She said, honey, that's a big step up. And I said, I know it. And I said, but my daddy is so rich. I said, my daddy is so rich, and my daddy just told me he's fixing to turn loose of some money. So, and she's like, oh, well, let's help you right over here, all right. But for me, I'm a visual person. I had to go into those houses. I had to go into other businesses, and I had to hang out with other people to begin to stretch me from the place that I was in, because I knew that the Lord wanted me to be blessed so that I could be a blessing. Do you know the reason why we have been able to give over $200,000 in the past 8 to 9 years in this community? Is because some people believe that God wants them to be blessed, to be a blessing to other people. The reason why we can sow into Compassion House and see the transformation of the families there, and a place called Hope, and Carter Hope Center, and Soul Station Ministries, and all of these ministries that are right here in our city, is because God blesses us so that we can be a blessing to help somebody else out. If you want a Maserati, get you one. I got one. I mean, if you want to get you a Ferrari, get you one. I don't have one of them yet. But I'm just saying, it's not about the stuff. It's about understanding that God wants you to be a blessing. And you're like, man, here he goes talking about that prosperity message. 3 John 2, beloved, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in health. It's not just so that you can have 36 condos and 14 houses and 92 cars that you can't drive. It's to be a blessing so that the other people around you can see you are a son, you are a daughter. You have the ability to help the people who are around you. I remember, and I know some of you don't like it, because I realize that some people don't mind you being blessed as long as you're not blessed more than what they are. My blessing didn't cost you nothing. My blessing didn't cost you nothing. Matter of fact, Daddy's got so much, if he decided to give you whatever, it wouldn't cost me nothing. So you got to get a hold of this right here. You got to get a hold of this. I remember when all I had was a yes. And that's all I have, because everything still belongs to him. I remember I remember when I was 19 years old, in 1993, sitting about 3 rows back in the middle of a service at Westside Church of God and running from God as fast as I could. But in that service, in that moment, I heard the voice of the Lord so clearly inside of my heart speaking to me that He had a plan, that He had a purpose for my life, and this is what He wanted me to do. I remember that moment. It was a moment that was connected to a memory. I remember when I was 19 years old and I was seeking the baptism of the Holy Ghost with the evidence of speaking in tongues. And I remember being in the floor, crying out to the Lord and praying. And I remember being filled with the Spirit of the Lord. I remember that we have these moments. I remember you're sitting right now just about the place where Heather and I met 27 years ago. We had a flatbed trailer parked up about right here. And their youth group and our youth group at Westside got together, and we had a flatbed trailer out here, and we were taking turns singing and ministering up on the stage in this big youth thing that was going on that night. And I remember seeing her for the first time, looking up there saying, "Ooh, I got to get to know that girl. She is fine." I feel the Holy Ghost. I feel the Holy Ghost and hormones. I mean, this is a powerful combination. And all of us, we have these moments that are connected to memories. I remember being in the vehicle with Dr. Mike Murdoch, a mentor, and driving. And him looking at me and saying, "Remember, Michael, the only problem that you'll ever have in life is a wisdom problem. It's not a financial problem. It's not a relationship problem. It's not a health problem. It's a wisdom problem." That's why the word said wisdom is the principal thing. When you get the wisdom of God, which is the word of God concerning your dilemma, there is nothing that you can't get out of with walking with the wisdom of God in a situation. And every time we go out somewhere, I've got my phone and I'm taking pictures, and Heather's telling me, quit taking pictures, just be in the moment. And I'm like, I'm being in the moment, but 5 years from now, I want to remember this moment. So I'm taking pictures. And then sure enough, 5 years later, Heather would be like, "Hey, remember when we went such and such place? Show me them pictures again." Is why? Because we're making memories. We're understanding that every moment is connected with a memory. Do we have the wisdom to discern the moment that we are in right now? I remember about 10 years ago, I was preaching a message from 2 Kings chapter number 3, verse number 16. And it was where the prophet Elisha comes up and he tells the king who is in the middle of the battle, here's the remedy. Here's what you do in the middle. Start digging a ditch. So I remember I preached a message entitled, "Can You Dig It?" And Brad got me a pair of Nikes, and on the back of it, it had "Can You" on one shoe and "Dig It" on the other side. I mean, we have these moments that are connected to memories, and those memories are always connected to our feelings. And so if you want to change what you're feeling, you got to change what you're focused on, because your feelings are always determined by where your focus is. Oh, I could just put the mic down right there and we go home. But I got so much more to tell you. But wait, there's more. In Joshua chapter number 4, when they crossed over, in 3 days' time, they went from preparation to possession of the promise. What if I told you today you can, in 3 days from now, you could possess what God has promised you? If you'd only walk out the preparation. And most of us don't want to walk out the preparation. We just want to keep doing what we're doing, and then God to give us what He said He was going to give us. But when they crossed the Jordan, Yahweh instructed Joshua, take these 12 stones, stack them up as a memorial, so that future generations are going to ask, what does this mean? You know, somebody may see you dancing in church, clapping your hands, getting so excited, lifting your hands, and there's some kids looking around saying, "Hey, mama, what does that mean?" They over there acting crazy. What does that mean? Let me tell you what that means. It doesn't mean that person's life is perfect and everything is going good and they got all their ducks in a row. It just means that person knows what God has brought them out of and what God has delivered them from. And it's that person understanding that God is faithful. And in the middle of me counting my pennies, in the middle of the living room floor, that He's did it before and He's going to do it again and He's going to do it again. That God is faithful. Can somebody testify to the faithfulness of God? Yeah. So they transitioned from the wilderness to the promise. Moses brought them out of Egypt, but Joshua took them into the promise. You see, every time God gets ready to move you forward, He sends somebody into your life. Can you recognize the people who God is sending in your life to keep moving you forward? Oh, Lord, help us to recognize. So there were 4 things that we see between Joshua chapter number 1 and Joshua chapter number 4 that helped them to transition from the wilderness into the promise. And the first thing that he said is, number 1, you got to follow the presence. Israel had a history of for 40 years walking in circles. They were real good at doing this right here. Whew, I'm making so much progress. For 14 hours, I've been doing this all day, every day, for 40 years. I must be getting somewhere. And then you look around, wait a minute, I'm still where I was to begin with. Have you ever got to the place to where you're like, man, I feel like I've got a lot of activity going on, but there's not a lot of productivity because the scenery is staying the same. I believe God wants to get us to a place to where He wants to change our scenery, and no longer are we going to look at what it's like to be in that circle. There came a time where God said, you circled around this mountain long enough. What if God brought you into this house this morning to say, you've been circling what you've been circling long enough. It's time to quit circling what you've been circling and move forward into the destiny, into the plan, into the purpose that Yahweh has for your life. He said, in this vicious circle, going through the same thing over and over again. And the Lord said, number 1, if you're going to get out of that cycle, number 1, you've got to stop going in the circle and you've got to start following His presence. He said, you're going to see the ark of the Lord. The priests are going to be carrying it. And wherever that ark goes, you got to follow. God told him, He says, I want to take you to a place where you've never been before. But in order to get to that place, you're going to have to keep your eyes on the presence of the Lord. You're going to have to keep your eyes upon me. There was I read this thing where there was this lady who was coming to the pastor, and she was complaining, and we always have those. And she was complaining about everybody in the church, and they were on their phone and they were typing and all of these other things. He said, okay, I got something for you. He said, I want you to take this glass of water. I want you to walk around the building 3 times, and I don't want you to spill not one drop of water. And she came back in. She's like, look, Pastor, I walked around the church 3 times. I did not spill one drop of water. And he said, well, while you were walking around, how many people did you see on their phone? How many people did you see not paying attention? Well, I didn't see none of that. I was just so focused on the water, making sure I didn't spill it out. And he said, that's what you got to be about the house of the Lord. You got to be so focused on the present. You want to be on your phone texting? You want to be on Facebook? So be it. I want to be so focused on the presence of the Lord because I'm tired of going in circles. I'm tired of going around the same old thing. I got to move into the promise that God has for me. You can sit there with your hands crossed and roll your eyes at me. I don't care. I'm after the presence. I'm after the glory. I gotta get what God's promised me. You think you can roll your eyes at me and scare me off? You think, oh man, you don't know me. I'm not intimidated by one person here or there. Determined that if I'm going to complete the assignment that God has given me, I can't be focused on what everybody else thinks about me and says about me. You see, some of you, God's going to deliver you from the opinions of other people. You already been delivered from devils, and now you got to be delivered from some people. I tell you, God, I believe God brought you up in this place today saying, today's the day that you get delivered from some people. You've been trying to please people for too long. Somebody that don't even matter. Somebody don't even like you anyway, and you trying to get them to like you. Just hang out with Trish a while. She'll help you out with that right there. She will help you all the way out. So if we're going to get out of the circles, we got to follow the presence. And the second thing is now, when you're following the presence, is that you got to stay close to the presence. He actually gave them how many feet that they need. He gave them the perimeter that they needed to stay in proximity to the Ark of the Covenant, so that, once again, he said, I'm taking you to a place that you've never been before, but in order to go to that place, you're going to have to follow the presence, and you're going to have to stay really close. Now, they were instructed to stay close, but how can you get any closer than he already is? If he's already living on the inside of you, how can you get any closer than what he already is? You ever thought about that? Somebody said, man, I just want to be closer to God. And I'm saying, are you saved? Yeah, I'm saved, but I just want to be closer. Man, no, get no closer. What you're actually saying is, I want my awareness of how close he already is to become the reality of my life. But your confession is, I want to be close, signifying that you have made up in your mind that you're far away, and the distance is a matter of what's going on between your two ears, not what's actually taking place. Once again, the power of confession. God, I know you are already close. You're already living on the inside of me. Now, I pray that my awareness of just how close that you are becomes the reality of my life, so that I can walk out what you have in store for me. Just touch a neighbor and say, live close. Live close, live close, stay close. The third thing that he said was sanctify yourself, or dedicate yourself to his purpose. Isn't it funny how we can be dedicated to some of the craziest things? We can be dedicated to fear. We can be dedicated to unbelief. We can be dedicated to going in circles for 40 years. Some of you don't have 40 more years to keep going in circles. But he said you got to dedicate yourself to what? If I'm sanctifying myself, if I'm dedicating myself, what am I dedicating? What am I sanctifying myself to? I'm dedicating myself to following his presence, and I'm dedicating myself to the awareness of just how close that he is, so that when he speaks, so that when he looks at me. How many of y'all had a mama? I'm in trouble with these mama statements already, but I'm just going to keep going for it. Trish, you're going to get it. You know she's going to call you. How many of y'all had a mama that you'd be doing something crazy, and she wouldn't have to say nothing? She'd just look at you, and you knew, I'm in so much trouble. You knew when we get home, man, it's on. You didn't have to say nothing. Do you realize the awareness of just how close we are to him can become that reality to where he just looks at us and we know what he wants us to do? We're corrected by the look. Man, we got to get to the place where we're not corrected by the beating, we're corrected by the eyes. He just looks at us and we're like, oh, straighten right up. Yes, sir. We're dedicating. Sanctified means to be dedicated. And so we have to be dedicated to following him and dedicated to living in the awareness of just how close he is. They went from preparation to total possession of the promise in 3 days, but it required them to stop going in circles. What if God brought you here today and said, quit going in circles? It's time for a change of scenery. It's time for a change in scenery. So we sanctify ourselves. That means we dedicate ourselves to his plan, to his purpose. And then the Lord says, remember that I'm with you. He said, as I was with Moses, I'm going to be with you. And I started thinking about this, and I said, okay, I asked myself, okay, how was God with Moses? Because if the same way that he was with Moses, he's going to be with me, I have to look at the life of Moses and say, exactly how was Yahweh with Moses? And then I started looking into this, and I said, man, he talked to Moses face to face like a friend. What if we're expecting, not when we die one day, but right here, right now, we're expecting to talk and see him face to face. You say, well, I don't know about that, preacher. I'm just telling you what the word said. Moses talked to him. It said Moses talked to him face to face as a friend. New Testament, we understand him as judge. We understand him as father. But do we understand him as friend? Oh, you better not do that. God's going to get you. You understand the judgment, don't you? The Father. But what about Moses knew him as a friend? What if we had a revelation that we are friends of God? Do you realize, I mean, I've got a couple of friends, just a couple, and very few. I got a couple of friends, and what I notice about this is we don't always do what I want to do. Sometimes we do what they want to do just because it's something that we want to do and I want to be with them. And even if it's something I really don't want to do, I do it just because I don't care about going to a basketball game. But hey, you want to go? We friends. You want to go to a game? All right, I'll hang out with you because we want to build fellowship. You understand what I'm saying? And some of you think that, that God only wants to do what he wants to do in your life. But there are some things that he wants to do in your life and with you because it's important to you. Oh, man, you got to get a hold of that right there. There are things that God will do just because he is your friend, that he will hang out with you. He will do things with you because it's important to you. And if it's important to you, it becomes important to him. So let me close right here. So in Psalms chapter 137, go there with me just for a second. Psalms 137, we're still talking about remembering. We're still talking about remembering what God has done and what he's doing. Psalms 137, look at verse number 1. It says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we captives sat down. Yes, we wept when we earnestly remembered Zion, the city of our God, imprinted on our hearts. On the willow trees in the midst of Babylon, we hung up our harps. For there they led us captive. They required of us a song with words, and our tormentors and they who had wasted us required of us myrrh, saying, sing one of the songs of Zion. He's like, oh, we got you now. I want you to sing now. Verse 5, and verse 4 says, how are we going to sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. Verse 6, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth if I remember you not, if I prefer not Jerusalem above all my chief joy. They were in captivity, Babylonian captivity. And in the midst of the captivity, the Babylonians came up and says, hey, remember those worship songs that you used to sing back in Jerusalem? We want you to sing them worship songs for us. And they said, how are we going to sing these worship songs in a strange new land? In other words, let me tell you what the Babylonians were wanting to do. They were wanting the Hebrew people to trade worship for entertainment. Oh, man, you got to get a hold of this. They was wanting to trade what belonged to God to entertain people around them. I want to tell you, we can never, that's what the enemy is after. He's after to get you to a place to where instead of worshiping, you're pursuing entertainment instead of the presence. Oh my God, help us out in here. And so the enemy is wanting to use what you meant for worship to entertain somebody else. But God's getting us to a place to where we're saying, you know what? I'm not trying to entertain you. I'm not here to entertain you. If you want entertainment, the house of God is not that place. Because I'm telling you, should I go there? Oh. You can go, man, you can go to some clubs and get some good music. You can go, oh, see, y'all ain't giving me no amens now, are you? No, you don't even acting like you know anything about that. You can go to a concert, a secular concert, and hear the most incredible musicians and voices you've ever heard in your life. You can go places and hear the most articulate speeches composed that you have ever heard in your life. If your goal is to be entertained, let the entertainment come from that. But understand, in the house of the Lord, it's about worship. It's about honor and glory to the King of Majesty. We're not making it about entertainment. I don't know how many times people come up, they didn't sing my song, ain't coming back to church. And I'm like, well, good. And like, cause we ain't singing that song for you. The song was never meant to be about you. The song was for Jesus. The song was for our Father. Our worship was for Him. You can pick apart anything you want. It's too loud over there. It's too quiet over there. It's too this and too that. It's not about your entertainment. It's about worship to one. My Lord, help us out. Somebody said, man, how was it? How was it coming in here, doing a video with the church empty on Sunday morning? During COVID, when everything was shut down, how you going to get up and preach? How you going to stay excited? How you going to encourage everybody when ain't nobody in the building? And I was like, oh, that's easy. There wasn't nobody in the building when I started this night. When I started at 19, I show up to a place and I'd be the only one there. I preach to Jesus. I preach to the angels. I would literally in my apartment go upstairs and lock myself in the door, and I would go through point after point and go through that thing like I was preaching to 4,000 people. When I stand before you today, I feel like I'm standing before a multitude of people. I feel like there's millions. I feel like there's nations in this room. I feel like there's nations on the inside of us. And you say, well, what if there's just one? God told Abraham, there are nations inside of you. When you understand each one has a nation on the inside of them. If your assignment is just to one, come on now. It's a nation. The power of one. It's like, man, when I did this, there wasn't nobody. In the middle of it, if there ain't nobody, I just keep doing it. Why? Because I'm not doing it for people. I'm doing it for God. I'm on the assignment that the Lord has sent me into. However, the assignment is a lot more exciting with your involvement. I give you a hand. It is much more exciting with your involvement. But when we have a destiny, when we have a plan, the plan to walk out, it's going to require us to get our eyes off of people and be delivered from the mindsets of other people's evaluations and opinions and what they think that you should do, because you're always going to have people tell you what you should do. But I want to tell you this, never take advice from somebody that you wouldn't trade lives with.